the Talk Station is proud to present The War Files. The War Files, a selection of interviews honoring our warriors of the greatest generation, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam.
Your name and where you're from?
My name is Lou Gazza from Long Island, Huntington, Long Island, originally.
Let's start with the war. Where were you when the war broke out?
I was in my room at Niagara University, which is upstate New York, where, by the way, in those days we had ink and ink wells, and the ink used to freeze in the ink wells, so it was an old building. Yeah, that's where I was when the war broke out. Some character came in and said, the Japs just bombed Pearl Harbor. I got to tell you, I didn't know where Pearl Harbor was. I did not know where Pearl Harbor was. I just about knew about Japs, but I was 17 years old. What am I going to know? Probably a little bit less than I know now, but not much less.
What were you studying when you were there at Niagara? What were your plans?
Economics. Well, there was an ROTC school, and I wasn't interested really in ROTC, but I finished out that year, which was, of course, in December. Finished out that year, and then I left, and I went home and got drafted into the Army. And then I did the usual, all the stuff. I went with a bunch of guys who I knew. Figured, the old gang will stay together. I never saw one of them again, ever. I don't know where the hell they all went. But
where did you go to basic school?
Camp Claiborne, Louisiana. And incidentally, at the same time I was there, he was the Secretary of State for Nixon. He was there. He got a little bit more famous than I did, but he was, for some reason or other, he was at the same time. That came out in a newspaper years later. But yeah, that's what Camp Claiborne, and then.
Now, when did you go down to Camp Claiborne? What time of year?
I think it was the summer, which is worse still because Camp Claiborne, Louisiana, is bad at any time, I think, but in the summer it's got to be worse. But anyway, that's where I was, and it was basic training, as they called it. And then that was it. And when we were assembled into companies, we didn't know where we were going, what was going on.
You were trained in what capacity in the Army?
I was an equipment operator.
All right. And you left from Louisiana?
Well, the company went to Iran, and the rumors were that we didn't know why we were in Iran. And somebody said we're going to Italy, which sounded pretty good to me. But turns out that we didn't go to Italy. We went all the way to Karachi, and I find myself in India with these other India, come on, you're 17 years old. Did you know where India was? No. This is crazy. So we're in India, we get on a train, it takes about 2 days to go across India, and we end up in Assam, which is just the border of Burma, which is where all the activity was going on. Then we learned about monsoons, and we learned about leeches, and we learned about Gurkhas, and we learned about all that different things that was really an education. I got to put the good light on it. It was an education. Come to find out that our project was that everyone was anticipating a long war with Japan on the island of Japan. And so our project, sort of secret, but it was, we rebuilt the Burma Road, and we made the Lido Road, and eventually, when we couldn't go any further into Burma, I flew the hump maybe 50 times.
All right, now the hump is?
The Himalaya Mountains, a very sort of a dangerous place to try to get over. It's an interesting thing, and maybe the only interesting thing, is that the equipment that we had, I guess you might have heard of, a 6x6. That was the workhorse truck of the World War II. 6x6. That means 6 wheels drive. like a Jeep was a 4x4.
Gotcha.
It was decided that we were going to go to Kunming. Now, how do you get to Kunming? Well, you got to fly over the hump.
That's China, Kunming, China.
Yeah, Kunming, China. That's how you get there. So, and it's not like two people going, you know, in coach class. This is the first thing they did on those DC-3s was they threw the doors away. There was none of those doors were ever on a DC-3 going over the hump. So we break down a company. Now, a company was maybe 40 trucks, I don't know, 40 trucks and how many, like 150 guys or something like that. This is the amazing thing about the United States to me. All 6x6s were made by either GMC or Studebaker. Go figure, Studebaker, right? But yet, when you break down the equipment and they send it over the hump into Kunming, where it's going to be reassembled, when these guys went to reassemble it, every piece fit, no matter if it was a Studebaker, no matter if it was a GMC, if it was a final drive, if it was a front-wheel drive, if it was a transmission, it was a cab. To me, that was an amazing thing because, you know, the United States was so on the ball in those days that they could take Studebaker, which everybody laughed at Studebaker because of the stupid cars they made, but they geared them up to do this war effort. They were, as far as I know, the only two companies that made 6x6s. Others made other stuff. But
Now, we're recognizing you were in the China, Burma, and India.
Right.
What was the purpose? What were you there for?
Okay. This was a pipeline construction outfit. Unbeknown at the time, but there were other outfits also. They had been, in fact, we flew pipe over the hump when they started to come back. They had what they called combat lines. Combat lines were very, very light pipe. One guy could lift one up, and they were 4-inch pipes. And every 10 miles, there was a pump station. Now, this, I'm talking about tough terrain. You know, you had the leeches, you had the monsoon, you had, Jesus, all the good stuff was, all the good stuff was there. You know, a leech, they like to go where the blood was closest, which I understand is behind the knee or in the genital area. These leeches, you don't feel them, but they could get a foot long. And they could be tough. You try to cut them with a machete, they wouldn't even cut. And imagine that thing, about that thick, being full of blood, your blood. Then, when they satiated themselves, they would drop, and then you knew it because you feel your shoes suddenly got full of water, but it was blood. And there are two kinds of leeches. There were leaf leeches, which are smaller ones, and the water leeches, which were really big. But they were on everything. They were on water buffalo, and I'm surprised. But supposedly they didn't transmit any disease. That's what they say. And but that was a small problem of one of the problems that you had there. But we were building this outfit was. Many outfits were building these pipelines.
Was this for oil?
This was for oil and gas.
Okay.
And the idea was that after we got over the hump, we were going to lay that pipeline to the Sea of Japan. We were supposed to invade Japan, which meant like a couple of million people. I mean, GIs. They figured like 500,000-600,000 GIs would be killed in that operation, maybe 2 million Japanese. And that was the whole idea. This was the whole thing that was going on with these pipeline outfits. And then, of course, it didn't happen. So that's the story.
Well, no. I want to go two things. First off, what was your job when you were doing this as a combat engineer, and what was your rank?
It wasn't. We were, as I say, we were not combat engineers. We were engineers,
okay.
Pure and simple. And I operated stuff like bulldozers and.
Oh, I know. So you were in the military, but what was the environment like? Because obviously it doesn't sound like it was very, very regimented, was it?
Well, it was regimented insofar as you had certain things that you had to do, and they had to be done, and but it wasn't combat regimented. It was, but you always had problems. Like for instance, in China, the Chinese believed, truthfully in that the devil or the bad spirits were always following them. So they would rush in front of airplanes when they were landing and when they were taking off. And the guys used to get very, very urinated off at that because they didn't want to hurt their propellers, And
what was the purpose of running in front of the planes?
To just get missed and have the devil get hit.
I got you.
And so it happened to me. We're going through a town. But this is in China, and it's not like any other place. But we're going through a town, and everybody, we're moving from one place to another. One day, some woman pushed a child, little guy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, pushed him in front of the truck. She figured to get the devil. But they didn't get the devil. They got him. Bogies, the brakes went on. The kid got spread about 12 feet along the road. So I got out, and we always had parachutes that had been dropped to us, and we used them as rags to have something. So I got some of these rags out, and I put it over the kid because that was the way. That's what we would do.
Right.
And so the Chinese thought that was a gift. They were very happy. They ding hao, ding hao.
Wow.
They took the rags in lieu of the kid. That was a good deal for them.
How long were you there in the Burma-China war?
After Africa, where we didn't know where we were going, we ended up there, I guess 3 years, something like that.
So you were there for the duration?
Oh, yeah. We were in the jungle when we didn't know that the war was over. We were so out of contact with everybody. We didn't know the war was over for 2 days.
How many Americans were there? How many Indians and Chinese?
Well, we had Indian Army people with us, which were very, very good. They were British trained, very, very good. They're the only people who could light a match in a monsoon.
How did they do that?
Because they had wax matches. Ours would get they would
soaking wet.
They were damp. They wouldn't light. They were little,
right.
little things, little pull out things. They would never light. But the Indians, they would make tea. They would chop down bamboo and make cups out of the sections of the bamboo. They'd have their tea at 4 o'clock. They'd light their light. They'd light their fire. How the hell they did it, I'll never know. But they had wax matches.
What about the Gurkhas? What was it like working with them?
They were the best people. They would do almost anything, and they could do almost anything. That's just great because they were no shoes. They would some people would have 2 hands. They would have 4. They could with their feet. They could go through that mud. I'm telling you. The Gurkhas were, what were they like? They were shorter in stature, muscular. They could live on seems like nothing. They ate whatever was around. They didn't no rations. Nobody dug into a box and got rations. They ate what the hell ever they ate. They subsisted off the land, but that was their neighborhood too. That was their area.
What was it like? I mean, was it a 5-day work week? Did you? What were the conditions?
365-day work week. You don't have days off. I mean,
that's what I can imagine. What was it like for you? I mean, without ever getting any time off, and basically you're away from civilization for a long period of time.
Well, we weren't really. Each other was the civilization. We had people who were a pain in the neck. We had people who were pretty good guys. It was a mix. I think a company was like 220 people or something like that. And most of us had malaria because of the Anopheles mosquitoes, which seemed to like that area pretty good. Most of us had jungle rat, and that meant gentian violet, so you were always sort of purple. Everybody was purple because just gentian violet was like an iodine thing. Or if it wasn't too serious, you used gentian violet. If it was a broken leg, then you had to go somewhere. But everything was gentian violet. Oh, we got the jungle rat. I'll put this stuff on it and it'll go away. Well, it never went away.
The Burma-China highway was never completed.
The Burma Road is still there.
Burma Road is there, but the
Lido Road was mostly abandoned. We got to Lashio, a place called Lashio, and that was as far as we went, I think. And but there was I don't know how long, but it was a long stretch that we made of this thing called the Lido Road. But of course, it was made to. It had to carry more than just camels and stuff. You know, this had to be made more to specs, and there were heavy stuff going over there. I mean, and a lot of stuff, and so that's why the story of the rock crusher and all that. And there were always British guys around. I mean, if the Indian soldiers were very, very good soldiers, but somewhere there were always British were all over in India and in Burma, and they were stationed there. You know, they would like have careers. In India, Burma. They were there for what 400 years or something in Burma, in India. I got to know a group of guys, British guys. They always had gin. Like, you could have K rations, they have gin. But they didn't have ice. But they had water. So they would say, then here's how we drink it. So they'd give you the drink, the gin, and there was never a shortage of gin. I don't know how the hell they did it, I don't know. There was never a shortage of gin. Gin, water, and quinine, a drop of quinine. Now that, later on, became gin and tonic. That idea that they had over there with the quinine, Schweppes patented that tonic water, came in a little yellow bottle after the war, way after the war. And it became gin and tonic, one of the most popular cocktail drinks that ever was, and a pretty good tasting. Oh, and incidentally, things happen, as that bumper sticker says. Things happen. Right. They always had quinine. Now the Japs controlled all the quinine. There was no quinine to be had, but the British always had quinine. There was things going on that not everybody was supposed to know about. They always had their quinine. And now, of course, quinine is very necessary to combat malaria. Mm-hmm. But we didn't have quinine, but we had Adabrin, I think it was called. Now, Adabrin it made you yellow. Yeah, Adabrin, everybody was turned yellow. Not yellow, but pretty yellow. Adabrin was a German patent. And we had Adabrin. They had quinine. They weren't supposed to have quinine. Yeah, but Adabrin, we had to take an Adabrin tablet every day. But the thing is that it was a German patent.
What was it like? I mean, how are you able to work under these circumstances?
Well, if it was really bad, you got sent somewhere and they let you rest for a few days. If it was cerebral malaria, which was not prevalent, but it was there, you died from that. There was no recouping. But if it was regular malaria like I had, you'd get knocked out for a couple of days, and you'd sweat, and you'd yell and scream, and you'd freeze, and you'd sweat, and you'd freeze, and you'd sweat, and then it seemed to go away. That was more or less what I would call normal malaria. I don't know. Normal malaria is not normal, first of all, but
I understand.
But it was less invasive malaria anyway.
All right, now you're in the jungle. You finally find out 2 days later, after the war's over, that the war's over. What happens?
Well, first of all, the war was over, but that didn't mean that the things were still going on. But orders had to be given that there'd be no more working on this project, and stuff would be packed up and gone back to India down this our road, and that eventually that's what happened. After the orders came down, because you can say the war's over, but maybe it's not over.
Right.
Like we were so on top of everything that we didn't even know it was over. So how are you gonna believe that to do something? So, but then the orders came down, and this stuff got packed up, and there were a lot. You're thinking of along the lines of one company, but there were maybe 20 companies. I don't even know how many companies there were of doing the same stuff that we were doing.
You shipped out. You shipped back to the States. You were still in the Army. 2 questions. What was it like arriving home? And tell me about your family, brothers,
Cold. My family, my brother was in Europe. He was a tank commander in Europe, and because he got home before I did, because Europe was over and tanks weren't a big thing over in where we were.
Mm-hmm.
They had them, but it wasn't like Europe, which was, Europe had everything, including black market. We could get a pack of cigarettes. It wouldn't be worth nothing. It'd be worth like 20 cents, 10 cents, or whatever it was worth. We got them. But in Europe, whereas a pack of cigarettes was a big black market item, so it was 2 different places, or completely different. Well, I got home I went to Fort Dix, Camp Dix, Fort Dix, I think.
Fort Dix in New Jersey.
Yeah, and that was a day cold. I got to tell you, cold, because we come out of the Mediterranean and we go across, and this is end of December. I think I got home Christmas Eve or something.
Wow.
Home, out, discharged. From India to Fort Dix was a big difference. That was a big difference. As far as that, then it was over. Then we started to do other stuff.
So you had a brother that was in the Army?
I had a brother one in Niagara that finished his ROTC, and then he went to Germany and pulled his 2 years after the war in Germany. And my other brother was seen a lot of combat in all through Germany, all those places that they mentioned. I think he was discharged before I was, not much, but a little bit before.
What was this, December 45?
45.
December 45.
Yeah.
Now, what was it like when you got home to see your brother and your family?
Well, it was very welcome. You'd write a letter once in a while, and then you'd get a letter once in a while, and it was all like me. There was 6 million guys that all went through the same thing. Well, some of them went through harder times my family was intact. Everybody was on good terms with everybody. There was no hard feelings. Some people came back to a real pain in the neck situation when they got home.
Right.
Well, he wasn't married. I wasn't married. The younger guy wasn't married. So there wasn't. It was just mother, father, and 3 sons.
All right. Now, what about when you got home? Did you talk much about the war?
Nah. No.
All right.
In fact, I didn't even know anybody who was over there where I was. So we could. Oh yeah, I did know one guy. Yeah, he was Vitoriti. He was a weightlifter, but he was more or less around where I was, and I got to find he came to work for us later on.
But what it's interesting. Everybody came back from the war, and all the people I've talked to, they put everything in their desk, their bureau drawers in their closet, and they went on about business. Why was that? What was it about the war that, I mean, you hit the ground running? What was it about that?
Well, you had stuff to do now. You were in the Army, and the Army was your life. They told you what to do, when to get up, when to go to bed, when to eat, when not to, when to do everything. Now the choice came. In my case, the choice came: do I go back to school? And of course, the choice was that I do go back to school. I went back and I graduated in 1948. I was supposed to graduate. Anyway, I was 3 years late. Mm-hmm. So in 48, graduated, and so you had an objective. The other thing, we had a couple of businesses that the other brother got involved in. The other guy he wasn't yet up in school. He didn't go up there until after I got out.
Now, when you went into the Army, what did your parents think?
Well, they put the star in the window next to the other star in the window. And,
for your brother.
Yeah, and they accepted it. Okay, they were from the old country. They were from Italy, but they accepted this. It was not like as if they had a vendetta against it or any. There was no talk of it. It happened. It happened. You go. You go.
Have you been to the World War II Memorial?
No.
Are you planning to go?
Well, I signed up. I'm not really that crazy about going.
All right. What is it about World War II veterans that they really never worried about any kind of a memorial or recognition for their investment, their sacrifice?
I think that they weren't geared for that. They just figured. First of all, most of us were draftees. That's number one. But I think they were anyway. It was something that you had to do. You got out, and it was something that you had to look for what was the next thing to do. I get a little tired of these people talking about the greatest generation and all this other stuff. That's a lot of baloney. You did what you had to do, and then you come home and you did what you had to do. There was other stuff that you had to do. You had to either go to school, you had to get into business, you had to, make money. Some people got married. All kinds of stuff that had to be done. You're not going to sit there and start commiserating about, I should have been this, I should have done that, I could have done that. I don't know what it is. I think that a lot of these old retreads like me like the attention. I don't particularly like the attention. I don't believe that longest generation, best generation, or whatever they call it. And going and looking at that thing, I got pictures of everyone, right. and including the CBI memorial. Where's the CBI memorial? I didn't know there was one. Yeah, there's one. I have a picture of it somewhere. Someone gave it to me. It's part of the war that very few people know anything about. Oh, it's the unknown theater. It was known as the unknown theater because it was, it was pretty tough in the beginning when the Japs were in Burma and all that. But then after that, it became a project. Because it became a project, we had to get over that road, we had to get over that hump, we had to go between the mountains, and then we end up in Kunming. And then the project was really only starting there. But then it had to go If you look at a map, from Kunming to the Sea of Japan, it looks like 500 or 600 miles. Of course, with our experience, we could do that with our eyes closed, because after going through what we went through, we could just lay that stuff out. And but it never got to that. It never got to that. All the stuff that was in Kunming, in the whole big scheme of things,
right.
2 or 3 companies of equipment and this and that. They say that Lido Road cost $1 million a mile in 1941 or 2 or 3 or 4, whatever it was. $1 million a mile sounded like a lot, and a couple of lives per mile. That sounded like a big statistic. I mean, it was tough to fathom. Jesus, it cost $1 million. Get more Chinese. But that's a story with. There you come home. You had stuff to do. I mean, the war was over, right? Everybody says the war's over. Yeah, the war's over. Now you got other stuff to do. Well, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to go get the business. You're going to get the business going. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. Because we always were in business anyway. So, my parents bought a small oil company, and my brother, they said, well, when the boys come back, they'll have something.
and Vietnam. The War Files is a TalkStation presentation.